Hello everybody, Wheel Stories. In this video I demonstrate how I adjust the valves on my BMW R1150R. The procedure is essentially the same for the BMW R850 and 1100 oil heads, and similar to the process for the newer hex head twins. If you plan to do the job yourself, do some additional research. Study how others perform the procedure. I'm not a professional mechanic, but I do perform routine maintenance on my bikes to save a few bucks. So to start, I remove the front alternator cover with an Allen wrench. 4 bolts to remove the plastic piece that hides the alternator belt. Once the fasteners are removed, I slide the cover out between the engine and front wheel. Now I have access to the pulley that I turn clockwise to get the engine to top dead center, TDC, for each of the cylinders. Next, I remove the valve covers. I place an oil pan beneath the bike, as some oil will leak from the cylinders during this phase of the project. I take off the plastic spark plug cover first, then I pull the ignition wire, the coil, with this plastic tool that came with the bike in the underseat toolkit. By the way, this 2003 BMW R1150R is a single spark engine, just one plug for each cylinder. To remove the valve cover, I loosen 4 bolts with a T40 Torx bit. I have the rare chrome valve covers on my motorcycle. Some BMWs may require an Allen wrench rather than the star-shaped Torx tool. After removing the valve cover, I pull the spark plug with a 16mm deep well socket. Now is a good time to inspect the condition of the plugs to see if they need to be replaced. Mine are in decent shape with only about 6,000 miles since the last change. Then I go around to the other side of the bike and repeat the process on the other cylinder. Okay, time now to turn the engine to top dead center and get down to the business of adjusting valves. I gently remove the rubber cap, this plug on the right side of the engine that covers the sight hole for the TDC mark. I remove the cap with a flathead screwdriver and my fingernails. To find top dead center, I turn the pulley in a clockwise direction. Never turn the pulley counterclockwise. I use the flashlight on my cell phone to peer inside of the hole to inspect for the TDC mark, the OT mark. And there it is. Now this is very important. There are 2 OT marks, one for each cylinder. I check the rockers for movement with my hands. They need to be slightly loose. That means the OT mark is set for this set of valves. If the rockers are tight and don't budge, that means the OT mark corresponds with the other cylinder, the set of valves on the other side of the bike. I'm good here. This is where I start. To adjust the valves, I'm using a set of feeler gauges that I purchased from Beamer Boneyard. The 2 gauges marked as .30mm are intended for the exhaust valves, the valves nearest to the exhaust pipe. The feelers marked as .15mm are for the intake valves, the valves closest to the throttle body. I normally insert all 4 feeler gauges to get a sense of which valves need to be adjusted, to get a feel for the clearances. For the adjustments, I use a 10mm wrench and a 3mm Allen key. The 10mm wrench loosens and tightens the outer nut that holds the inner piece in place, where the adjustments are made with a 3mm Allen key. Counter torque with the Allen key each time you loosen and tighten the outer nut. I make the adjustments in micro increments, testing with the feeler gauge as I move along. An adjustment on one valve impacts the clearances on other valves, which means I need to go back and forth between each of the valves, making further adjustments, ever so slight each time. I want the feeler to glide smoothly back and forth, nice and easy with mild resistance, and not fall down or slip off when I let go of the gauge. The process can be tedious and repetitive, but eventually, after making a series of tiny adjustments, the clearances land in place. The key is to ensure the clearances match. where the feeler gauge registers the same tolerance for each valve. Once there, I tighten the 10mm outer nuts to the appropriate torque, recommended at 8 Nm. After finishing the adjustments on one side of the bike, I spin the alternator pulley clockwise to the OT mark for the other cylinder and repeat the process. Again, I make finely tuned micro adjustments to ensure the clearances match for all valves, with the same smooth feel as I glide the feeler gauges back and forth. Once I'm confident the valves are adjusted correctly, it's time to button everything back together. I insert the spark plugs back into the bike after dabbing some anti-seize lube on the threads. I always start by hand. Then I tighten the plugs to the recommended torque measurement of 20 Nm. I clean the rib of the cylinder and valve covers and line up a new set of outer valve gaskets. The old gaskets were feeling a bit stiff and kind of brittle. I also replaced the inner gaskets. The older gaskets had become slightly deformed. I mount the valve covers and tighten the bolts in a crisscross pattern. And tighten the fasteners to the recommended torque setting, 10 Nm. Then I snap the ignition wire, the coil stick, into place over the spark plugs and mount up the plastic plug covers. Lastly, I install the alternator cover, and that does it for the valve adjustments on my BMW. I normally replace the engine oil and filter in conjunction with the valve adjustment procedure. Changing the transmission and final drive fluid is a good idea as well. I demonstrate the fluid change procedures in another Wheel Stories video that I have linked below. Leave your questions and comments in the comment section, and until next time for Wheel Stories, thanks for watching, everybody.